Dawg Nation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. It's time to roll out the red carpet, put on your best clothes, because today is something very, very special in the history of DawgNation at Large. Later in the show, we're going to have our second annual DawgNation at Large Oscars, if you can't tell by Connor's coat and tie.
I'd point out, I think this is technically the first ever DawgNation at Large Oscars, given we didn't have that name on the show this time a year ago. But yes, very excited to hand out some hardware to look back on, a 2024 season I think was a lot like the 2024 Oscars. Some highs, some lows, maybe not the year many people wanted, but still plenty of deserving moments that deserve to be acknowledged.
I would like to think that, unlike the Academy sometimes, we're going to get everything right, but it's not much different. Some things are going to surprise you, but we're going to get to that later. So for now, this is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
Usually this is the part where I try to say something witty or try to make fun of Connor. But before we start, I do want to say that this is a show that is so special to me. And even though it wasn't called DawgNation at Large when we did it last year, this was the first real fun thing that Connor and I got to do together. And then we kind of realized, hey, we can continue to do something like this if we put the effort into it. And so it sparked all of the fun things that you see now. And as a tribute to that episode, we're actually going to open up today's show with the same topic that we talked about last year, because a lot has changed between now and then. Kirby Smart is still on top as the best coach in college football currently, but how has that changed since last year? Did the playoff change things? Who's rose up to the top and who is falling off as we speak? Then we'll do our Dog Bite segment where we'll cover a variety of topics. This time we'll even talk about the Georgia basketball team potentially making the NCAA tournament. And as spring practice approaches, who are those newcomers that we're excited to see out there on the field? And then, of course, we will wrap up the show with the DawgNation at Large Oscars. Don't want to give away too much on it, so we'll go ahead and start here. I don't think that it's any question that Kirby Smart is still the best coach in college football. But where my mind goes is this year with the playoff, how things changed. I feel like a lot of coaches were exposed. Last year, there was no question that it was Kirby, and then everybody else was just kind of at the bottom. Did anybody get close this year to making that gap smaller, Connor?
Absolutely. I think you see Ryan Day get closer with him finally winning a national championship. I think you see Marcus Freeman take a step forward with him getting the national championship game and beating Kirby Smart in that manner. Steve Sarkisian, I think, showed that he can sustain success at Texas. Well, obviously, I don't think that puts him in the same tier as Kirby Smart. I do think it shows that he is someone to be taken more seriously. Dan Lanning picks up a first big win in his career at Oregon, beating Ohio State, beating Penn State, winning the Big Ten that first year for Oregon out there. So a lot of coaches have made up ground. And I think the bigger thing is Kirby, obviously the best coach when it comes to the old way of college football. But with rev share potentially starting in July, with a lot of changes, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with everything that this sport has gone through in recent months, it's going to look very different in the next 10 years than I think it has in the past 10 years. And so how Kirby goes about navigating that, I think is going to go a long way in navigating whether or not he's able to stay on top of this coaching carousel with what comes next for college football.
So what's crazy is going back and watching the show from last year and seeing the coaches that we were talking about, that was the number 2 in question. It was Lincoln Riley, Dabo Swinney, and Lane Kiffin. And for people like Lincoln Riley and Lane Kiffin, we were discussing how, this is a good opportunity for them this year to make that gap smaller because they're going to have a better chance at making the playoff, which is something they haven't been able to do. Well, Lincoln Riley and USC have fallen off the face of the world, and Lane Kiffin had every opportunity to make it to the playoff once he beat Georgia, and they still dropped the ball. The only coach that is still in consideration to be in the upper tier of coaches is Dabo Swinney. We made fun of him all season long for not taking any transfers, but it looks like he's willing to adapt more. And Clemson does end up winning the ACC, making the playoff, winning that first match. So I guess Dabo surprised me the most because he was the one that we were saying wasn't going to be able to rise to the occasion and adapt to the new way of college football.
Did he though? Because they went 0-3 last year against SEC teams, getting thoroughly outplayed against the ones that made the playoffs in Georgia and Texas. They also drop a game to Louisville. And if they don't beat SMU, who got obliterated by Penn State, they don't make the playoff in the first place. So I know Clemson, they're a team. They have a lot of hype entering this 2025 season, but they've still got to show that they can take steps forward and still, I think, get back to that elite tier of college football. Because when they matched up with those teams in 2024, Georgia and Texas specifically, they clearly weren't in that same weight class there. So now they bring some pieces back. They finally dip into the transfer portal and add some help there. But they're a team I'm maybe more skeptical of than the average fan. But at the same point in time, Dabo Swinney is the only other coach in college football that has won multiple national titles that is still coaching. He and Kirby Smart are the only two that can say that. And so Dabo clearly has some past championship experience, but as we move into this new realm, I don't know how much credence I give that just because of how different the sport is, and with Dabo in particular, how stubborn he has been to, I think, adapt to the times.
Well, now he's got no other option but to, and we've seen that with him being more willing of bringing somebody in the portal. But I do have to give Clemson credit, even in a weaker conference, they were still able to do what was needed to get to the playoffs. So I do give him some credit for that because some of that is good coaching and the talent that they have been able to retain. But now we look at the coaches this year, and the criteria last year was you had to be a head coach for so long. We're throwing that out the window because the playoff completely changes things. So it changes the conversation that we're having now. Now we're talking about some of the younger guys, the Dan Lannings and the Marcus Freemans that have been able to make a really quick impact, but it's also just because of the way that they've been able to adapt to this new era of college football, unlike some of the last guys that we were talking about. So now the conversation completely changes because of how teams and the young coaches were able to make a statement in what was a crazy year of college football.
Yeah, you look at someone like Dan Lanning, it's his fourth year at Oregon. These are mostly all of his guys at this point in time, so he's firmly put his stamp on this program. They've got a relatively easy schedule this year, I think, especially compared to the SEC. They have some key places to replace from a season ago. But I think with Dan Lanning and taking that next step, they just got obliterated by Ohio State in the college football playoff. And part of that is I just think talent acquisition. Ohio State was clearly the most talented team in college football a season ago. Oregon, they won all the regular season games. They technically beat every team on their schedule. And so with Lanning, I think there's still a little bit of coaching in big games. Yes, last year they were able to get one-score wins against Penn State and against Ohio State. But in those games where there's equal talent, or at least it seems like those two teams are equals, he hasn't yet dominated the opposing team. And I know that's maybe moving the goalposts a little bit, but as this program takes on more and more of his personality, I think Oregon needs to find a way to dominate those elite tier opponents. You've seen Georgia do this, whether it, beating Texas by double digits in the regular season last year, always whipping up on Tennessee, 2 years ago, blowing Ole Miss out at home. Georgia, more often than not under Kirby Smart, has found a way to dominate non-Alabama teams. I wonder if Dan Lanning in this Oregon program, as they enter year 4, can take that next step.
So this brings me to the question of Georgia was able to dominate Texas twice. And you can argue that Texas may have not had a great, difficult SEC schedule, but still think you throw Steve Sarkisian into that category just because of the talent levels that they're bringing in. I feel like especially in their recruiting classes, they're only going up and up every single year. They've got the funds to do so. You keep Arch Manning after he sits on the bench for 2 years. And so this year, I don't know if it's going to with Arch Manning, who knows how things are going to go. I feel like we'll know more about Sarkisian as a coach when they're given an SEC schedule that fares the same as teams like Georgia and Florida. But with what he's been able to do in that smooth transition into the SEC, I would also throw Sark in that category.
Texas absolutely hit the ground running. I think they answered a lot of questions, not just about their ability to compete in the SEC, getting to the SEC championship in year 1 there. But I think the other big thing, prior to the 2023 season, Steve Sarkisian had never won more than 10 games in a season. And now he's done that in back-to-back years. He's the only coach that can say he's gotten to the college football playoff semifinals in each of the last 2 years. And while Texas, I think, had an easier road than just about any college football playoff team last year, he's shown that he's at least able to build this program out. And as they have now fully embraced Sarkisian and his time there, I believe this is going to be his 5th season at Texas. These are all his guys. he's obviously got a lot of riding on Arch Manning because while he's obviously an area of excitement, they have to replace a lot both in the offensive line and in the secondary. But a year ago, we were talking about, hey, they got to replace a lot at wide receiver. They got to replace a lot on the defensive line. And they showed they were able to do that. So I think Sarkisian now, at least in terms of Texas being a team that can contend to make a national championship game every year, I think they're still there. I do think you've seen him get outcoached at times. It came up this year against Georgia, losing at home and then losing in the SEC championship game when Georgia was playing a backup quarterback. And even in that game against Ohio State in the college football playoff semifinals, there were some late game questions that I think Sarkisian didn't exactly cover himself in glory with. And so that's where he can take that next step, is winning in those biggest of games. Not too dissimilar, in my opinion, to what Dan Lanning has to answer to.
So I believe if you took a survey of 100 people and you asked them who the second best coach was in college football, a lot of them now would say Ryan Day, just because Ohio State just did win the national championship. But I'm still not entirely sold on Ryan Day as number 2. You did win the national championship. You got hot at the exact right time, but it also took you a substantial amount of money to put together that roster. You do have some success in retaining some of the guys that could have gone to the draft but decided to stay. But you can't get over the Michigan hump. And here is what I have to compare it to. We were there for the Georgia Tech 7 overtime game where Georgia didn't look like they stood a chance, but they end up prevailing. Ryan Day still couldn't do that with Michigan. Kirby Smart wouldn't lose to the biggest rival. They find a way to win that game, and Ryan Day has not been able to do so when this was the farthest separation of talent between these two teams in a long time.
The thing with Ryan Day that I'm interested in, the reason Ohio State won a national championship last year, it won't be the reason that they will potentially repeat in 2025. They were so reliant on a lot of seniors, a lot of upperclassmen coming back and trying to win a national title, and they absolutely did that. That recipe is going to be very different this year. They're going to be a lot younger. They have a lot of key veterans to replace. Now, Georgia has proven that they're capable of doing that, but has Ohio State yet demonstrated that, just given all that they lose? That's going to be a big question with Ryan Day. Now, having a Caleb Downs in the secondary, having a Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver is going to go a long way in answering some of those questions. And then there's the obvious Michigan aspect of this. He has one career win as the head coach at Ohio State against Michigan. Mind you, Kirby Smart has a similar record against Alabama. So there is something at least similar in those regards in terms of the way that they struggle against a particular opponent. And so with Ryan Day going into this year, like Ohio State is still going to be more talented than Michigan. They do have to go visit Ann Arbor the last week of the regular season there. And as we saw this year, Ryan Day can answer a lot of the questions and beat a lot of big teams. He beats Tennessee, he beats Texas, he beats Oregon, he beats Notre Dame in that run to a college football national championship. But it's that one game. And as long as he continues to struggle in that regard, and specifically against Michigan, the questions are going to exist. Now, if he repeats what he did in 2024 and 2025, where they lose to Michigan again, but they still win the national championship, I think maybe we look at that Michigan game a little bit more like how people look at Kirby Smart versus Alabama. But right now, given that Day only has one national title compared to Kirby Smart's 2, and that one of Kirby Smart's national championship wins came against Alabama, I think that's why there's a little bit of a gulf right now between the way that Ryan Day is viewed and the way that Kirby Smart is viewed.
So for the past 2 seasons since Nick Saban's exit, everybody knows Kirby's at the top, okay? But we don't know how much longer he has as a coach. Is there a possibility that while Kirby is still an active coach, somebody's able to make that jump?
Absolutely. I think, again, you see the success that Ohio State had a season ago. Texas and Oregon are showing that they are committed to throwing resources at fixing the issues that they have there. And with Georgia, look, Georgia's not crying poor. Georgia is not, yes, they're getting guys to come to Georgia to discount. That speaks to what Georgia has built. And some people are pointing at it as, oh, maybe Georgia's cheap. I believe that Georgia is willing to contend and put every possible resource forward to winning a national championship. What Kirby Smart has to show that he has a willingness to do is continue to adapt, continue to make changes as college football adapts with it. Revenue sharing is going to be a big thing. I think scouting is going to be more important than ever because of how you identify players and dole out what is effectively going to be a salary cap. So Georgia's got to continue to adapt. Kirby's got to continue to show that he can change with the times. If he shows a willingness to do that, I think we've seen enough from just about everything else that he is a great enough football coach to where he will find ways to win. He's got head-to-head wins over Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, Ryan Day, and Dabo Swinney. So I believe that on an equal field, Kirby has shown that he's better than those coaches. The question is, can Georgia and will Georgia continue to be on the equal field as the college football landscape continues to change?
So the way I see it is a lot of the guys that we discussed today are good coaches, some on the rise more than others, but a lot of these programs, if they had the chance to get Kirby Smart, they would take it over the guy that's in that place, and that's why he remains the best. If you're a Georgia fan, you got to bank on that all day. So in just a minute, we'll talk about Georgia is still going to play a spring game, unlike some of the coaches in the programs that we just talked about. But first, here on DawgNation at Large, we are always so excited to partner with Zagoria Law Firm. And one thing I really love about Zagoria Law Firm, it's one of those niche areas that you don't realize you need it until it happens to you. So I'm glad that we have somebody that we can recommend here on DawgNation at Large, because what we love about them is that they're the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. That's right, dog fans. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They wrote the book on how to win these cases. Nobody does it like them. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, make sure to give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. With that, let's do dog bites. One of the first events. Whoa. You see that? We have emojis. I don't know who did that. Awesome job. Anyway. Oh, don't even do it. Okay.
I know who did that. That's our producer extraordinaire, Cody Chafin's, making all the little upgrades.
Some might say he's the best supporting cast member out there. Anyway, one of the first events I got to cover for DawgNation was the Georgia spring game. I still look forward to the spring game every single year. I used to come as a kid, and now all these top-tier programs, it started with Nebraska, now it's been this domino effect of Ohio State, Texas, USC. They're not going to play in their spring game, and it is not often that I agree with Dabo Swinney, but he did put out a really good statement the other day on tampering's not going to change because spring games are eliminated, and some of the veteran players, like C.J. Allen, might not need to play in the spring game, but someone like Justin Williams should. The young guys need the exposure and the experience and the noise of a real crowd when they're playing in a game. I don't care if it doesn't count for anything. The spring game is good for Georgia because the young guys need this playing time. They didn't get that much of it last year, and for some people, not even just the class of 2025, this is the first real-time game-like experience that they're going to get.
One, I wouldn't put Nebraska and Matt Rule in that top-tier category.
I didn't say top-tier category. I said they started it, and now the top-tier programs follow. Trust me, I'm not giving that much credit to Nebraska.
And so with Georgia, like, look, Kirby Smart, the first thing he did when he got here, 93 K-Day back in 2016. And so, look, you know, Georgia, yes, they play long seasons. That's why Texas is no longer doing this. They've got talented players that other teams are going to try and pull away. You saw a year ago Christian Miller flirt with the transfer portal before ultimately electing to stay at the University of Georgia. But Kirby Smart still believes the best thing for this program is to have a spring game. And so as long as that is the case, that will continue to happen here at Georgia. And I think maybe one thing that has been glossed over a little bit is just what this day means to fans, and specifically younger fans, families out there, because going to a Georgia game now is just an expensive proposition. And so if you're able to bring the family out in a more relaxed environment where you can come to Athens on a beautiful spring day, I think there's still something of value in that in terms of building out a fan base, in terms of building out traditions. And I'm glad to see that Kirby Smart and the Georgia football program are still honoring that.
So I have to admit, I'm glad to be sitting back in this chair from the Combine. We touched on a lot of things about the Combine over the last week or so, but these were the two takeaways that I don't think that I've had the chance to talk about yet. Number one, the love for the Dallas Cowboys is still as alive as ever. I have to listen to these NFL reporters ask teams or ask players, did you meet with this team or this team? Was it informal? And the one team that every player would light up when they got to talk about who they met with was the Dallas Cowboys. Like the look on, I believe it was Michael Williams' face. Like he was so excited. So I took that away. And also, I believe it was Malachi Starks who talked about earning your weekends. work out really hard on Friday, and then maybe you have the chance to have the day off on a Saturday in the off season. So I didn't know about the earning your weekends thing. That was interesting.
It speaks to just what this event is every year. One, it's a little bit of a circus. You have all these people coming together, but from a Georgia perspective, it's another big event for them. They had 14 guys at the Combine. Only Ohio State had more. And you see guys like Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, I think, make himself some money. Malachi Starks doing very well in the positional drills there. Tate Ratledge with his mullet flowing to the sounds of Freebird or whichever online viral sensation you want to go with. It was another very strong week for Georgia at the Combine.
All right, Falcons. Speaking of the Combine, the Falcons made a statement that they would only be interviewing defensive players. Famously, the Falcons have not drafted a Georgia player in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. And now the cards line up to where they really have the opportunity to take a Georgia guy in the first round at the number 15 pick. I've seen a lot of boards where it's got Michael Williams going at that spot, but now the Jalen Walker injury, does that mean that the Falcons have a better chance to take them if that's what they're willing to do?
Yeah, I think it's important to note here, one, Jalen Walker dealing with a little bit of a thigh injury. We'll see how that impacts his pre-draft process. He's reportedly got a pro day set for April 17th, right before the draft, a chance to work out. He just will not be working out with his teammates at the Georgia Pro Day on March 12th. But I know we've talked a lot about the Falcons potentially taking a guy in the first round, and it's important to know the Falcons, in the history of their franchise, have never taken a Georgia player in either the first or the second round. I think with the needs that they have, they've got a chance to do that in both the first and second round this year. I think they could go either Michael Williams or Jalen Walker in that first round there. And then in the second round, I think you look at someone like Jared Wilson, who Atlanta's probably going to be losing their starting center in free agency. I think Jared Wilson is someone who could come in and play very well there at that center position. And it seems like after the Combine he had, whereas among the offensive linemen, he ran the fastest 40-yard dash. I think there's a world, potentially, where the Falcons take a Georgia player in the first round and they take a Georgia player in the second round. However, knowing this franchise, they're probably going to take small school guys that you quite frankly haven't heard of with both of those picks.
I mean, it's almost just comical at this point, right? Like, if I'm in the Falcons office, I'm just taking one so everybody stops talking about it, because especially this year, if they don't want to take one, the heat is going to be on them more than ever. Falcons, you have the opportunity to do the right thing. Just go ahead and do it this year, because, I mean, I don't know if there's been a draft where things just lined up so perfectly for this thing to happen. So just do the right thing. Okay. March means March Madness, one of my favorite times of the year. I love the basketball postseason, and oh my gosh, who would have thought the Georgia basketball team has a real shot of getting into the tournament? They've won the last 3. 2 of the 3 have been on the road. Now they just have to take care of Vanderbilt this Saturday at home. But that would just provide some March excitement along with spring practice and pro day, and just give us that little extra excitedness that we need for this wonderful month.
Yeah, this is a Georgia program. I would caution against everyone going ahead and booking their travel plans or planning to take work off to watch Georgia basketball on the first 2 days of the tournament. They're not in yet. I think they have to win one of their last 2 games, or one of their next 2 games, rather, at home against Vanderbilt on Saturday, their first game in the SEC tournament, to fully punch their ticket. The bubble, very fluid this time of year. You just know that there are going to be bid stealers from lesser conferences or even from power conferences there. And so Georgia, if they take care of business this Saturday against Vanderbilt, or they beat probably another bubble team in either Texas or Oklahoma in that first round of the SEC tournament, they're going to be well positioned to go dancing for the first time since the 2015 season. They have the longest current drought among SEC teams in terms of going to the NCAA tournament. And getting there with Mike White, with this team, with how up and down this season has been, where this team is playing their best basketball at the most important time of the year, I think would be huge for the future of this program.
But either way, it's time to start getting that dual action screen ready, because the tournament is almost here. Time to start making your brackets. Spring practice is coming up. And what newcomer are we the most excited to hear about from practice? Connor, take it away.
I believe the answer here is Elijah Griffin. I was ready to say Isaiah Gibson a week ago, but hearing what Warren Brinson had to say about Griffin at the Combine, I think further notches up what to maybe expect from him. You know, defensive line is not traditionally a place where you've seen freshmen come in and make big impacts. It's not like safety, wide receiver, even as Nate Frazier showed at running back a season ago. But Griffin is, to use the popular vernacular, he's just built different. And so if Griffin's able to come in, and I'm not saying he has to be Jalen Carter in 2022 right away, but if he's able to come in and play a role for this Georgia defense and make an impact right away, I think that's going to be huge for what this defense can ultimately try and achieve in 2025.
I thought you might say Elijah Griffin, so I said Isaiah Gibson. You lose Damon Wilson. You need somebody on that outside position. Out of all the guys that they bring into the class, he's the most ready, in my mind, plug and play. I want to hear good things about Isaiah Gibson coming out of practice because he has a chance to make an impact pretty early. So I'm going to take Isaiah Gibson with my pick. And with that, that is Dog Bites. Now, before we get to the DawgNation Oscars, if you need to pause your feed, go grab yourself a little drink, go make your popcorn. This is the time to do so. If I wasn't at work, I would probably be having a finished long drink watching this. I'm excited to have one on Saturday when I'm not at work. So many different options depending on whatever you like. It's a pre-made gin cocktail, and even if you're not a big gin fan like myself, it's still a really great drink. White can if you're feeling something a little bit healthier. It's the zero sugar one. If you're more into flavor drinks, peach or cranberry. I really love the cranberry. Can't go wrong with classic blue. And if you just had a really, really, really long day, go for that black can. It's a little bit stronger. You don't need as much of it. So if you haven't had one, please try to find the time to do so. You can visit thefinishlongdrink.com and use their website to figure out where the nearest long drink is to you. And so if you haven't already, grab your long drink because it's time for the DawgNation Oscars.
Welcome to the most fabulous night of the year. It's time for Kaylee and Connor's DawgNation Oscars.
And we've even rolled out our best staging. Look how handsome he looks there in his tux. Personally, I love the white. So, Connor, do you have anything that you would like to say before we start?
I am glad to be here. Look, I don't know what the Academy elected to do this year. As usual, there are probably going to be a few controversial selections. But ultimately here, we're just here to celebrate the 2024 Georgia football season and all that it encompassed.
Yes, just know that the members of the Academy, their privacy is very important to me. I will not disclose the members, but there were 11 this year, and we had to throw in an extra person to break some ties. So I think you guys might be surprised with some of the results. Like last year. Oh, let's go ahead and bring Cody Chaffins in. Cody.
Hello.
Hi. First off, thank you for the amazing picture back here.
Sorry I didn't dress up like you guys. You're making me look bad today.
That's not even possible. That can't even happen. So, all right. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And our first award last year, and it's going to be the first one this year, is the Best Newcomer of the Year. The nominees for Best Newcomer are going to be KJ Bolden, Nate Frazier, Chris Cole, and then Trevor Etienne counts because he's a transfer. Now, before we announce the winner, I would like to extend to Connor if he would like to guess what each one is going to be, and we can kind of reflect on each of these guys. So for me, when I'm looking at this list, KJ Bolden, I still remember how surprised I was when he got a really early possession against Clemson. When he came out that early, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And then I think he made a tackle on one of his first plays. So exciting right off the bat. Nate Frazier, a late bloomer based on need, considering he wasn't a spring enrollee. How quickly he was able to get into the game and make an impact was insane. Chris Cole, I don't even think we knew that he was going to be playing, especially with somebody like Justin Williams in front of him. And then Trevor Etienne basically beat Texas for Georgia twice. So I think all these guys make a great case.
Yeah, at the risk of getting played off by the music, let's just go ahead and reveal the winner for the Best Newcomer for the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs.
And the winner is KJ Bolden. All right, so KJ Bolden with our first award of the night. The next one, it's going to be a player in a supporting role. So not necessarily your skill guys. I think more guys on the line and the vibe kings. We kind of combined that this year. So the supporting player nominees are going to be Jared Wilson, Peyton Woodring, Brett Thorson, Ty Ingram Dawkins, and Cash Jones. Connor?
Yeah, these are all guys who I think chipped in, played big roles. Peyton Woodring, one of the best kickers in the country. Brett Thorson, who could forget his tackle against Tennessee? And then our own favorite here at DawgNation at Large, Cash Jones, making a number of big plays throughout the course of the season and famously throwing the horns down. So without further ado, the winner for Best Supporting Player for the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs is...
Cody,
My man.
I just wanted you to be on the show specifically for this part, Cody.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate Cash Jones. He could win it again next year. He could be a 2-time winner, which you don't get a lot at the Oscars back-to-back, but we could see that next year.
And what's crazy, too, is Cash was a late ad. We had to do some debating on some of these things. Cash was the last one on the ballot and ends up taking the award away. And when I think about Cash Jones, I think about that video of him. Can't remember whose helmet he's hitting. Maybe Dominic Lovett, and then the fireworks go up. Like, that alone could win him that award.
Yes.
Yep, Cash Jones, big-time player, had out Georgia's only touchdown in their loss against Notre Dame.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next award. This is going to be Best Game of the Year. The opener, Georgia-Clemson. Then you have both games against Texas, the one in the regular season as well as the SEC championship game. Then Georgia's very crucial win over Tennessee. Not sure if Georgia makes it to the playoff if they don't win that game right there. And then, of course, who can forget the instant classic 7 overtime game with Georgia and Georgia Tech. 8. It was 8.
Clean old-fashioned 8.
Clean old-fashioned 8, that's right. Okay, well, still instant classic cinema, whatever you want to call it. Connor?
Yeah, it's important to note Georgia won all of these games. You know, we like happy endings here at DawgNation at Large. The Alabama game not on here despite the back and forth affair that was. But without further ado, the winner for the 2024 Georgia Football Game of the Year is...
Yeah. It's going to be Georgia and Georgia Tech. Clean, old-fashioned 8. This was one of the ones that it came down to one vote.
Yeah, was this our Mikey Matson, Demi Moore moment here, Connor?
I gotta say, I don't think the Academy got this right. Look, I get, it's a rivalry game, 8 overtimes. Kaylee mentions the Cash Jones helmet bop right into the fireworks, a great environment. But I thought that game against Texas is going to stand up to the test of time.
Which one?
Be something that the second one, the SEC championship game. And you wonder if both of those coming against Texas sort of ate into the voter toll a little bit there, being the same opponent. I believe the Academy did not get this one right, but we have no choice but to respect the decision.
I would like to make a counterpoint to that not a single person voted for UGA Texas regular season, so I don't think that had any impact in it.
I voted regular season. I think I did.
No, I'm pretty sure it had 0.
Oh, I thought that one to me set the tone that this team could be elite.
Okay, well, anyway, we respect the opinions.
Cody was
of
also
the Academy.
assaulted in that game. People forget.
It will always be in my mind.
All right, let's move on to the next award. Let's go Best Defensive Player. The nominees this year are Jalen Walker, Dan Jackson, Dalen Everett, Michael Williams, and then another late addition in Chaz Chambliss. Connor.
Always a great category here. Georgia known for its defensive players and performances. I've got my personal favorite in Jalen Walker, someone who I believe should always be nominated and recognized in this category. But we got a lot of guys who made big plays and big games this year. And so without further ado, the winner for Best Defensive Player on Georgia's 2024 team is...
It's Jalen Walker. Was it going to be anybody else? I don't think so. This one was the one that won by the largest margins, and I'm not surprised at all. I thought he was going to get every single vote. It literally could not have been anyone else.
This is a Daniel Day-Lewis or a Meryl Streep, like, duh.
Right.
Yeah, just an easy and obvious one. Led the team in sacks with 6.5, was the emotional leader on this team as well, did everything that was asked of him. And in the biggest games against Texas, Tennessee, Clemson to begin the season, he made big-time plays, and I'm glad that the Academy will always reserve and remember this. And while winning the Butkus Award is nice, winning a DawgNation at-large Oscar just tastes a little bit sweeter.
Doesn't it?
I'm sure he'd take that, yeah.
All right, let's move on. It's our Best Offensive Player. Carson Beck, Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier, Arian Smith, who did lead the team in reception yards, and then Oscar Delp. Last year's was pretty competitive. This year's, I'll tell you guys, it came down to one vote. I'm not going to tell you who the two were, but just know that Brandon Adams was the deciding vote in this one right here. So this year, the Oscar for the Best Offensive Player goes to... It's Trevor Etienne. Can we get the reactions of the panel?
Everybody, I don't know. It kind of feels to me, it's like who you got to pick. Somebody gets to win the award. So, congrats, Trevor Etienne. Take it home, put it on the mantle, and well, that's it for me.
Yeah, when I think about, he essentially beat Texas twice, two of the most important games of the entire season. So if it was going to go to anybody, Trevor Etienne, rightfully deserving. So now these are our two big ones of the night, okay? These are our best pictures and best directors. This is the best moment, not necessarily what we're going to see next, but this is the best moment. So the first one is Gunnar Stockton survives the hit in the SEC championship game where it could have gone either way, to be honest. We've all seen the pictures of the eyes rolling in the back of his head. The fact that he was able to not only hold on to the ball, but get up and walk to the sideline, a lot of Georgia fans are going to be talking about that for the years to come. Then the Nate Frazier Gator Chomp versus Florida. I'm not sure what he had to deal in the aftermath of this with the coaching staff, but it sure was really cool to watch at the time that it happened. And I said before, I wish he would have doubled down and done it again. Then you've got the Dan Jackson forced fumble versus Georgia Tech, which ultimately changed the course of that game. Then Jalen Walker sacks Arch Manning versus Texas in the regular season. We'll never forget that picture of Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers on the sideline. And then the Brett Thorson tackle versus Tennessee, and everything that came along with it, with him coming in and giving the demonstration on how to give a proper tackle. So all in all, I would say that we got some really iconic moments from this team this year.
And while the season didn't, I think, end the way that many people would have liked, I think that as we look back on this will still be a worthy moment. So the DawgNation at-large Oscar for the 2024 Georgia football season for best moment belongs to
Dan the Man, the forced fumble against Georgia Tech. Some people snub Dan Jackson. We don't do that on this show. Just saying.
I think for Dan in particular, a guy who I think prior to that forced fumble and that win against Georgia Tech, his most memorable moment, unfortunately, was him getting blasted, blocking for Keely Ringo in the national championship game. So for him to make that hit, to spur them on to victory there, he made a number of big plays for this team this season, and I think really embodied what this defense was all about. So good on Dan Jackson for ending with I think, an incredible play and an incredible hit that Larry Munson would have been screaming about.
Oh, yeah. All right, last one. This is the big one. This is for all the marbles. This is the last one of the night, the one that you wait 4 hours before. You probably got one eye open as you're watching it. This is our best individual performance. So let's start with Dalen Everett's 2 interceptions, because Quinn Ewers loves throwing the ball to Dalen Everett in the SEC championship game. Then Jalen Walker's 3 sacks and 1 fumble recovery versus Texas that had the entire college football world talking about him. Then Trevor Etienne's 3 touchdowns versus Texas. And then Carson Beck's game against Tennessee, 347 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and one of the only rushing touchdowns from Carson Beck. So all 4 tremendous performances. But this year, the final award of the night, the DawgNation Oscar for best performance, goes to Jalen Walker, our 2-time winner tonight.
The Honora of the 2024 Georgia football team. I think that this game in particular, I talked to him after it.
Stop it.
Sorry, if you've seen the movie, it's funnier.
Jalen Walker, I don't know if I've ever seen a player dominate specifically a half like Jalen Walker did that first half there against Texas. He had them so confused. They were switching out quarterbacks and it didn't matter. An all-around elite performance in a game where, look, the officials, I think, tried to give it to Texas, and Jalen Walker just said absolutely not. So a great performance from Walker, I think, as someone as we get further away from this team and as he goes on to have a stellar NFL career, we will look back on very fondly.
And I believe Jalen Walker was the only 2-time winner of the night, correct? Yes?
Yes.
Correct.
Wow.
He definitely did not come there to take pictures.
No.
He came there to eat.
All right. Well, DawgNation, that is our second ever DawgNation Oscars. Connor, do you have anything else to say about it?
Hopefully next year's offensive player of the year category goes a little bit better than this one, where it's awarded somewhat by default. And if it's not, we're going to have a lot of changes to talk about going into 2026.
I was going to say, it says a lot about this season when the toughest one to pick was the best supporting character out of all of them, and not your defense was a lock. I thought about just putting him on the ballot because I knew that's how it was going to go. Offense was like, oh, this sucks having to look this up. So before we get to what Connor learned today on the show, I want to give a shout out to Daytona Beach. Guys, got to start planning your vacations, whether that's spring break if you procrastinated it, or you're just thinking about that summer trip that it's finally time to take. Make sure to look at Daytona Beach. 23 miles of Atlantic shoreline, so much more than just laying on the beach. You can fish, kayak, hike, or you can golf. If that's your thing, super easy access to Daytona Beach. You can either make that drive or fly directly into the Daytona Beach International Airport. Now is a great time to score amazing deals on coastal accommodations. So you can do that by visiting DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals. It's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals. Connor, do you have any thoughts on the Oscars that we saw on Sunday that we didn't get to talk about? The real Oscars, not the DawgNation at Large Oscars, but the real Oscars. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here. Another great year with DawgNation at Large. I want to just thank the Academy and what I'm getting played off. Thank you guys so much. I love my family. I thank my agents and my publicist. Have a great night.
What was your most deserving winner of the night?
Probably Kieran Culkin for supporting actor in A Real Pain.
And you know what? I thought that Mikey Madison deserved it over Demi Moore, so that's my hot take. Sorry about it. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on our second ever DawgNation at Large, and probably the last time that you're ever going to see me in a dress. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.